Tonight, the crisis has escalated even more into a broader regional fight. Reports are saying joint US and Zionist strikes hit multiple sites in Iran, including claims of damage at the Natanz nuclear facility, while Tehran has launched missile and drone strikes across the Gulf and into neighboring capitals. These strikes have triggered shipping disruptions, damaged tankers, and prompted some marine insurers to suspend war risk coverage. We'll test the claims, examine the fallout on trade and diplomacy, and ask the hard questions. All this and more shortly. And to get the latest images and the damage reports on reactions as well from the ground, let's hear from Zahra Farjani in this report.
For the third consecutive day, the United States and the Zionist entity continue their strikes on Iran, targeting multiple locations across the country. Local media say the attacks targeted the Diplomatic Police Center, Gandhi Hospital, and the headquarters of Iran's state broadcaster in the capital. Explosions were also heard in Isfahan, Yazd, Khuzestan, and Bushehr. Tehran also confirmed that the Natanz nuclear facility was among the sites hit. The humanitarian toll is mounting. Iran's Red Crescent say at least 555 people have been killed since Saturday, including 41 in initial strikes on border areas, while military sources report 8 security personnel killed in separate bombardments. On the US side, the Pentagon say 4 American service members have died since the start of the confrontation, the latest succumbing to injuries from Iran's initial response. President Donald Trump described the current operations as only the beginning, warning that a larger wave of strikes is yet to come and saying he would not rule out deploying ground forces.
Following our obliteration of Iran's nuclear program in Operation Midnight Hammer a short while ago, we warned Iran not to make any attempt to rebuild at a different location because they were unable to use the ones that we so powerfully blew up. But they ignored those warnings and refused to cease their pursuit of nuclear weapons. In addition, the regime's conventional ballistic missile program was growing rapidly and dramatically, and this posed a very clear, colossal threat to America and our forces stationed overseas.
Meanwhile, Iran's Supreme National Security Council Secretary Ali Larijani accused Trump of sacrificing American lives to serve Netanyahu's expansionist ambitions and pushing the region toward chaos.
Trump has sacrificed the money and blood of Americans to achieve Netanyahu's illegitimate expansionist ambitions. He turned his slogan America First into Israel First, making American soldiers victims of Israeli hegemony. He has pushed the region into chaos on false hopes, and now he is concerned about further losses among his forces.
As rhetoric hardens on both sides, the risk of a broader regional escalation continues to grow.
Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Washington will not set a timeline for its military campaign against Iran, stressing the war will end only on President Donald Trump's terms.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it. The mission of Operation Epic Fury is laser focused. Destroy Iranian offensive missiles, destroy Iranian missile production, destroy their navy and other security infrastructure, and they will never have nuclear weapons.
And to help us navigate the military, political, and economic fallout, we're joined tonight by an expert panel, beginning with Dr. Hamoud Salhi, Associate Dean, Professor, and Senior International Officer from California State University, Los Angeles. Hello, sir, Doctor, and thank you again for agreeing to be with us.
Always a pleasure to be on it with you, Karim.
Of course, shortly we'll be joined by Dr. Yvonne Ridley, journalist and Middle East author, analyst as well. She'll be joining us shortly. And we're also honored to have Mr. James Bowden, a senior advisor, European defense geopolitical analyst from Virginia. Welcome, sir, and thank you for agreeing to be with us.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. It's always a pleasure.
Pleasure is all ours. So let me start with you, Dr. Hamoud Salhi. The very first question is very simple one. We have seen negotiations on the way. We have had some optimism from those negotiations in Geneva, but then all of a sudden we had this military intervention in the Middle East. So according to you, would this lead to more instability and extremism in the region, or it is the way to solve the entire situation?
I'm not sure it's the entire way to solve the situation. I think we're going the wrong way about it, at least for those who believe that peaceful means are better than military means to solve conflict. But what we've seen developing now is, on the one hand, there is the public. It's noteworthy that the Iranians, or the Iranian foreign minister, talked about American lives lost. This follows President Donald Trump and the Israelis talking about rescuing the Iranian people and urging them to rise against the regime. The other point that is happening, which I think we are readying for a longer conflict, or at least 4 or 5 weeks. Both the Secretary of Defense, you had him earlier, are not specific on time. But there is a discussion how long this will take. The American Chief of Staff, the military Chief of Staff acknowledged today that they are sending troops.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems that there is an issue with the connection you have, Dr. Hamoud Salhi. Let me just, forward the question to Mr. James Bowden. Mr. James Bowden, you were just listening to my first question now. Would you think that the U.S. has the responsibility to intervene in conflicts in the Middle East, even if it means going against international law or norms?
Well, my opinion on this operation has been very divided. This has been probably the clearest and most naked instance of the United States supporting an action by Israel and having very little actual justification for this type of action. And so I think that in this case, there is a significant problem with the United States engaging with Iran. And I believe that there needed to be a much more lengthy peace and negotiation process, even if at least to give us a little bit of moral authority and clarity on the fact that negotiations have value and that it is a process that America respects, and that people who engage with us in negotiations can believe that it will get to a resolution and it is not just simply a cover for violence.
Mm-hmm. But then we have had some reports, because of this military intervention, we had some reports due to the strikes that some damage was done to some of the nuclear facilities at Natanz, for example. And the IAEA says it has found no clear evidence yet. But then we have a lot of concerns. So according to you, what technical evidence would independent inspectors need to confirm or refute such claims?
Well, all right. So let me articulate this. It has been hard to understand how the administration can continue to justify this on the basis of a nuclear program that they have said that they obliterated. Mm-hmm. And we definitely need to find the so-called smoking gun. We need to find radiation material. We need to find centrifuges. There needs to be a well-documented amount of evidence that shows that Iran had been able to constitute their program. Now, it was just a year ago, or a little less than a year ago, that these strikes happened. And so they've probably had some time to get in some replacement centrifuges.
Mm-hmm. Again, another technical issue. Getting back, or let me at least welcome Dr. Yvonne Ridley, a journalist and Middle East analyst, diplomatic editor, columnist and author from Scotland, Glasgow. Hello, ma'am, and thank you for agreeing to be with us tonight.
Thank you.
Our pleasure to have you again. So please, what is your reading on the current situation? I mean, the situation in the Middle East is escalating very rapidly, and we're hearing a lot of reports about damages being done to a lot of infrastructure, military infrastructure, as is reported by a lot of Western media, although the Iranian side is saying that even civilian infrastructure and a lot of casualties have been recorded due to the strikes. Now, what kind of motives would the United States and the Zionist entity have to launch something, or as they are calling it, the Epic Fury operation, even against, let's say, international legitimacy and norms?
Well, the Western media is only as good as the information it gets. And that information at the moment is coming from one Donald Trump. And the truth is that this war is not playing well for the Americans at all, and therefore by de facto for the Israelis. This is a regime change conflict that was initiated by the US. And the moment they set off those first missiles aimed at killing the supreme leader was actually the moment that I believe America lost this war, because Donald Trump was saying in advance that he was going to kill the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, and he was giving notice. And this was foolishness on a grand scale, and you have to wonder who is advising him, because this is a man of faith, the second most important person next to Grand Ayatollah Sistani, Ali al-Sistani in Najaf, and he was saying that he was going to kill him. Well, you know, the Ayatollah is 86 years old, and so I think the threat of an impending death from the US president would not have shaken him. In fact, we know that he didn't change his routine. He was at his home with his daughter and his granddaughter around him. And it is quite clear that he was saying, here I am, if you're going to attack me, do it. And it was quite obvious that those around him were also wanting to take part in this martyrdom as well. You know, in his faith, that means virtually automatic paradise. And so this was a man who was not hiding in a bunker. He was, in fact, being quite brave.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Hamoud Salhi, if you can hear me, I would like to get back to the first question that we have initiated, but then add to it another comment when it comes to the USA prioritizing the interest of the Zionist entity over its own interests. And this is something that some critiques have been highlighting. And even the Iranian side have said that it seems that Donald Trump has made the Zionist entity first instead of America first. So the question goes like this: should the US prioritize the interest of the Zionist entity over its own interest and also relationship with other countries in the region?
Very, very good question. Are you hearing me now better?
Perfect.
Okay, so to go back to the initial question, there are signs that now we're sort of preparing for a long-term conflict, at least from the American side and the Israelis. Talks are now about, in the main, by declaration by President Donald Trump, his Secretary of Defense, are basically refusing to answer that this could be a long term. But then you have the military chief of staff who announced today that there are troops going to the Gulf region. These are signals that we could see that we are here for a longer period of time, at least some are saying 4 to 5 weeks. In terms of the fighting the war, fighting this war for Israel, this is a growing debate in the United States, and it is a serious one because it is centrally now, even in the Congress. We hear unusual, which was never before in mainstream media, Democrats represent and from the senators, Democrats, and from the House of Representatives, questioning the merits of this approach and how much of this serves America's interest and its national interest. At the public level, we also see a large number of particularly the majority of the Democrat, the youth, who are definitely no longer in solidarity, if you want, with the Israelis. So it's a question that comes all along. There is some truth to it, because when we look at the timeline of how this sort of attack came about, if you remember back in December, there was talk, and we were prepared for another for an attack on Iran. This is in addition to the one we had back in June 2025. Well, as we all know, it was Prime Minister Netanyahu who basically told President Trump that he should hold on because he was worried about the Israeli defense system, and he thought at the time that there was not enough force, or Israel did not have the defensive capability to stop the Iranian missile, and it was postponed because of that. And on January 13th, we remember how President Donald Trump came in and told the Iranians the help is coming and soon. So there are these facts, there's this announcement that are very clearly point to the fact that is more a decision made for Israel than for the United States. And on top of that, the Americans have long time ago, they learned specifically from 1956 war, which didn't happen when the United States stepped in and basically told the Israelis not to attack, not to attack. As we know, now, in 1967, in April, an Israeli envoy got assurances from the American President Lyndon Johnson at the time that the United States will not intervene to stop Israel when it has a justification to do what it has to do to protect its national interest. Meaning that from then, and this is why we didn't see the United States doing any actions against Israel, and when we see the unconditional support for Israelis. So from that perspective, there is legitimate reason to argue that this whole idea is to protect Israel, and it serves the Israeli side more than anything else. Of course, there is the connection to AIPAC, the Jewish lobby in the United States, and all those things fit all theirs together.
And I would like to invite James Bowden to comment a little bit about the justifications, especially that we are hearing these reports, Mr. James Bowden, about the damage to nuclear facilities that are safeguarded by the International Agency of Atomic Energy. How can this actually justify, or how can policymakers find justifications to strike against the site and their IAEA safeguards?
Well, again, I think that one of the chief problems about this entire operation has been the wandering and vagueness of the justifications. We've watched as we've been offered ballistic missiles, the nuclear program, and then also regime change. And specifically citing the nuclear weapons, let's understand that there is a level of sovereignty that is and national interest that is overriding. Yes, there are these international bodies that do supervise these sites, yet if there is an imminent danger and an imminent threat, then I think there is legitimacy for any state to go after these targets. You know, if there's a missile about to be launched, or if there's a nuclear weapon about to be finally assembled to be put on a launch pad, then any country that is directly threatened by that would have the right to strike. And notice all of my provisos here, because we've actually seen none of these types of threats emerge from Iran. You know, again, as far as we know, their program had been significantly set back, and so that does reduce the moral authority for which the administration has had to go in and conduct this operation.
And Dr. Yvonne Ridley, when it comes to nuclear weapons and proliferation, we see that Iran, despite all the criticism, has allowed this International Atomic Energy Agency, and it did defend its right to have nuclear power, while we see the Zionist entity maintaining a policy of nuclear ambiguity. So neither confirming nor denying its nuclear capabilities. Now, isn't this double standard?
Yes, of course it is. It's what the Americans have done, have effectively blown up the whole nuclear proliferation treaty by sitting down, negotiating with the Iranians, who were also there in good faith. And according to the Oman negotiators there, they said that it was going well. And then this rug was pulled from underneath their feet, and it was thoroughly reprehensible behavior by America. But Donald Trump is not acting like the President of the United States. He's nothing more than an Israeli stooge. And he listens far too much to Netanyahu, who has been urging the world to attack Iran since the 1980s. There are various speeches over the years that he has made, and his last one made no pretense at all that he was after a greater Israel. Now, of course, the American people will be looking at this, and they will not see a great patriot in their president. You know, MAGA has gone and it's been replaced by MIGA, Make Israel Great Again. And we'll see this tomorrow when the Americans all rush to the petrol stations or the fuel stations, and their fuel is not going to be at $3.28 a gallon, which is what it is at the moment. It's going to really increase now because of Donald Trump's foolishness in attacking a regime of which he knows nothing about, and his equally foolish dilettante supporters who've been advising him are also out of their comfort zone They know nothing of the Iranian people. You know, I was saying before that Donald Trump had urged them, rise up and take to the streets. And my goodness, they have. They've taken to the streets in their hundreds of thousands. And instead of shouting death to Khomeini, they're shouting death to America again and chanting death to Israel. So it hasn't worked. He doesn't have the people on his side. And, you know, the Iranians this is quite a different country to Iraq. It's 5 times the size of Iraq. And with a population which has been preparing for this moment for 50 years. And if they haven't got a few tricks up their sleeves by now, I would be very surprised. The Iranian battle plans are actually showing that the Iranians are doing very well. Yes, a lot of their missiles are being intercepted, and we're seeing that. But I think they know that, and I think they've planned for that. And 2 or 3 missiles are getting through these defensive shields, and they're hitting with great accuracy the American radar systems. You know, the Americans have about $100 billion worth of radar systems at various points in the Middle East, and it's quite clear that the Iranians know exactly where they are. And at the moment, they've destroyed about $100 billion worth of defense systems with these 1 or 2 missiles that are getting through. So you have to wonder if they're sacrificing 80 or so missiles in one flourish in the expectation that 2 other missiles will hit the target with great accuracy. I don't believe in coincidences, and as I say, the Iranians have been planning this for 50 years now. And I think that, again, Trump has been very naive when he says, oh, it'll all be over in about 3 or 4 weeks. I don't think it will. I think it will go on for months and months. And how will it end? Because the Americans will want a ceasefire. Nobody's going to trust them.
And Dr. Hamoud Salhi, so Dr. Yvonne Ridley have shed some light on very important points when it comes to the consequences of this aggression against Iran. And of course, what we can see in the very short term, or the immediate effects even, the energy prices spiking. Now, according to you, what would be the long-term consequences if this does not come to a solution? And what kind of legitimacy would the aggressors even find in the eyes of international audiences to keep this going?
It all depends how this will unfold. But if it's going according to the Israelis and American plan, we are about to see a reshaping of the Middle East with a fragmented Iran and under an Israeli control agenda, and where chaos and stability is the norm rather than the exception. If we go in, and that's also in line with the American perspective, which it sees this as an opportunity to restore what Marco Rubio said, the dominance of the United States and the globe, meaning that leave China out, leave Russia out, and I'll be in charge of that. But what's happening, this will be viewed as a move that will see the same fate as those we've seen in Iraq, specifically because it's touching almost every part of the region in the Middle East and Northern Africa by indirectly. This will create an atmosphere of hate towards the United States. More, needless to say, Israel as well, So we are heading into a form of very, very difficult situation. Now, the consequences, we could see them starting from today. The oil prices have gone up because of the war or the closure of Strait of Hormuz. You have prices, as Ivan rightly said, it will effectively come down to the American people or the Western people in general, because the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz is 20%, and it has a majority of it going to Europe, China, and other places. So there is an effect on the lives of the Americans. It's very, very interesting. There is an attitude of sort of, or not caring, or the news, the event is this war is on the screen all the time, but you have a less sort of fair attitude where people are not interested. But when this continues, you could see that, and we start looking at the consequences of rise prices, oil prices and products in the market because of how the products that are derived or using oil, then it will become a headache for the Americans as well, and the European for that matter. And then in addition, you have the instability, that is what's in the region, and that will affect countries. We have countries that have seen long time of stability, and they were seen as a destination for European. This will change that, because what's happening is that these countries are no longer sort of not. They are subjected to instabilities and things like that. So we're heading on a bad road or on a bad path, and it doesn't smell very nice. Rather, we are seeing major challenges that this region will have to will be affected by. And most of it, all of it, I should say, will depend on how this war is going to go in the next maybe day, 2 days, a week, or 2 weeks. And the longer it stays, the more dangerous it becomes for the region. The more likely that the Israelis and the American will feel it, and they might start thinking about reversing course or looking for a solution. I think this is the moment where the United Nations Security Council, despite its problems, where the United Nations General Assembly should step in and right what's wrong. And needless to say, that there is a violation of international law committed here, and that should be looked at it from a different perspective. So, Karim, the consequences are immense, and it will take a long time for the region, especially those who are affected by directly the countries that are affected, to gain trust of the rest of the world. And you may see the beginning of the outflow or of Israelis. A growing number of Israelis will leave Palestine, and others will refrain from coming because of what's happening on the ground.
Thank you indeed. And Mr. James Bowden, yesterday in a similar coverage, I've discussed longly with Dr. Hamoud Salhi when it comes to the institutions in Tehran and how they manage the succession of leadership. And of course, they have a constitution that guarantees a swift shift from one leader to another. And it says simply that the regime is here to stay. So don't you think that the U.S. perhaps has underestimated the Iranian regime in a way, maybe ignoring their formal and even informal institutions in Tehran, managing the emergency succession if senior leaders, even if senior leaders are incapacitated, let's say, and even historically we have seen the regime stable and there is this chain of command even during sudden shock events. Now, what went wrong here? Why do we always hear from President Donald Trump that this is not going to take a long time and the regime is going to change and fall, and even we see him inciting the Iranian people against the regime and asking them maybe to, as he called them, for the free people there to, this is their opportunity to seize their land once again and be free. What is your comment about this?
Well, okay, let me see if I can catch up here. Donald Trump has no interior life. He is definitely not an intellectual and does not spend a lot of time reflecting on these kinds of things. And so no doubt his understanding of Iranian government systems is very surface level. I mean, most Americans, and sometimes even I occasionally wonder if his understanding of American government system is very surface and shallow. And so his ideas and his hopes regarding what might be the outcome of these operations, I don't think is really going to meet with reality. And I have commented over the last couple of days how truly frightened I am that he has been taking out all of these leadership figures, because that is something that the United States has traditionally eschewed, because it wants to be able to deal with somebody who can surrender the country and who can give the orders to lay down arms and cease fire. This is something that we did in World War II. We avoided killing the leadership in Japan. In Germany, we respected the transition of power to Donitz, and we have continued to observe that. And so it's actually very nerve-wracking. And I want to correct something, because we have seen that the Iranian population is very divided. So not only do you have a lot of people from different sections of the country who want to be their own independent country, but you have some supporters of the government and you have non-supporters. And my central fear has been that without leadership and without strong recognition of authority, Iran could actually descend into a period of civil war. Trump's idea that he can simply bomb things out of existence, and then everything that he has said has been, and then hopefully the Iranian people will step up and fill the gap. Well, that's not a solution. We used to have a saying here in America, and sometimes you'll see it in stores. It's a sign that says, you break it, you bought it. And so far, the Trump administration has been wanting to tear down that sign and say, well, we're going to go in and smash everything up, and then we're just going to leave and hope magically that things get better, which is not a strategy and gives me great concern.
Thank you indeed. And Dr. Yvonne Ridley, back to you. If maybe the motive is to kind of establish a regime that is democratic, that respects human rights in Iran, don't you think that the US maybe should worry about other countries that don't have that very set system, to govern democracy and human rights in the Middle East, particularly with regards to some countries without even naming them in the Middle East? We know, the Arab monarchs there do not really go by the line of democracy, yet they are allies with the United States, and the United States doesn't have any problem with them.
I don't think any country is going to take lectures from the United States on human rights, not when we still have Guantanamo open as a legal black hole on the landscape, not when you have civilians being shot by ICE, the immigration body that was created by Donald Trump. America has huge internal problems, and But I think, again, this all goes back to ordinary Americans are more in danger of rising up and bringing down Trump rather than Iranians rising up and bringing down their regime. I mean, this all goes back to the days of Miriam Edelson, who was a major donor for Donald Trump and his administration. And this Israeli-American businesswoman, the widow of a casino magnate, Sheldon Adelson, she's acting like a pimp who has bought US troops. And those US troops, those soldiers, are dying for Israel. This isn't about make America great again. It's about make Israel great again. And once they realize that, and it's starting to filter through, I think that Donald Trump is going to end his days as an impeached president. I think he's going to face so many impeachments because he has clearly broken international law. He clearly has no regard for international law. And as for looking at Iran and saying, oh, yes, we want to bring human rights there, and then they target 2 girls' schools and murder 168 girls between the ages of 7 and early teens. You know, the Iranian people are not going to forget, and I don't think that they're going to forgive. And the fact that their supreme leader has been brought down as well, you know, the Islamic Republic is invincible. You cannot defeat a people who are ready to die for their faith. And this is something that Donald Trump has severely underestimated. He doesn't know anything about the culture of the people. When he was describing the death of the supreme leader, he said, he was having a breakfast meeting with his advisors. Well, hell, it's Ramadan. He wasn't having a breakfast meeting at all. He was breaking his fast with his family around him when they decided to put in those missiles and murder him. So, you know, this is not going America's way. Trump is standing there telling people how great he's doing, how great the military is, how some might die, and that's the price that you pay. But he's not paying that price. His son Barron won't be paying that price. Netanyahu's son is on holiday in Florida with his mother. So he's not with the IDF. And of course, the ordinary people on the ground in Israel and America can see this, and they are having to pay the blood price. While the American president and the Israeli prime minister, who on the day that the bombing started, jumped straight onto a plane and held a meeting in Germany. So, you know, these are the measure of the leaders that are conducting this battle. Whereas the supreme leader was saying, here I am, and I'm sitting here, and I'm not moving. And that has travelled well with the people, but it's also impacted the Shia community around the world. And, you know, Trump couldn't have done more damage than if he'd killed the Pope during Lent.
Thank you indeed. And Dr. Hamoud Salhi, let's just imagine this scenario, just the way Donald Trump might like it. If a new interim leadership forms in Iran, what kind of diplomatic signals from Washington would be most useful, perhaps, to stabilize the situation?
Well, that assumes that the new leadership in Iran will want to work with President Donald Trump. Most likely that will not be the case. But if we are to imagine, as you ask in Karim, I think the first thing that the American president should do is to lift sanctions. That is 100%, because that is sort of a practical, a pragmatic way of giving something the Iranians to start their life or to better their lives. The second thing is to engage in a rational dialogue and to discuss the nuclear weapons or the nuclear making in Iran. President Donald Trump could do well in addressing the issue of the nuclear in the entire region. So why is it a nuclear country like Israel attacking a non-nuclear Iran under the claim that this country is about to have a nuclear weapon in a week? And that week was about maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago. We're still on that week. So that's a comprehensive way of addressing the real problems. The third one, perhaps, is to understand that like any other nation in the world, the Iranians have to have means to protect their national sovereignty. President Obama understood that by leaving out the defense missile outside the nuclear deal. He worked out the nuclear deal and left the Iranians to create ways of how to protect their national interests by not addressing the issue of the ballistic missiles. That is a way of gaining trust in the region. And the last one, we have to go to the basic. That soft power is the way to win the hearts and minds of people. We cannot continue to bombard people and to believe that we have the might, therefore we are right. That is a wrong philosophy, and it doesn't work well. So there is plenty of things to do in our imagination, Karim. I just wish it happens.
Mm-hmm. Thank you indeed. And Mr. James Bowden, Dr. Hamoud Salhi highlighted the fact that lifting the sanctions could actually ease the situation a little bit. And do you think yourself that, or at least to critiques who are saying that sanctions do not work at all, and sanctions on Iran are only hurting ordinary Iranians and exacerbating regional instability?
Well, look, sanctions work only as far as they are in force. There are a lot of European nations that have issued tons of sanctions that have not worked, and they've had no teeth, no bite. The United States has instituted a number of sanctions that have been enforced and have been bringing down the economy. Now, yes, that has largely impacted the people, and that is because the Iranian government was continuing to shift every single penny in their wallet towards missile defense, towards their military programs, and towards the nuclear program. So the government did not fulfill its moral responsibility to say, you know what, we need to invest less in our military and shift this back into the economy. So, and that is one of the reasons why you bring sanctions. You need to exert influence and power against the government, and it hopefully will shape and change policies. And so if there's not some pressure, if there's not some impact, then it's wholly invalid. Now, I just want to interject here. From an operational standpoint, the United States and Israel are conducting a highly successful, well-oiled operation. Contrary to the other panelists, she is highly and grossly incorrect. Iran is beaten. Iran will not win this war, and the United States has not the United States has not lost the operational aspects of this conflict. We have only lost 6 American personnel in a conflict which, given the size and the extent, should have cost tremendously more lives. So I just want to put that firmly to rest, that what we are seeing, at least from an operational standpoint, maybe not a legal standpoint or an internationally recognized standpoint as a victory, but in terms of raw military power, this is everything of a victory. And I think that if the American people can be happy about one thing, it is that we have not seen greater life sacrifice and greater bloodshed on the American side in terms of carrying out this operation, whether it is for the Israelis or for ourselves or for both. So,
good. Maybe I would like to give the mic now to Yvonne Ridley to respond to your comment. Dr. Yvonne, so according to James Bowden, maybe at the international level, when it comes to norms and legitimacy, the United States is not doing so well, but purely at the military level, the USA is winning this war.
I think James has been listening to too many of President Trump's speeches. You know, we saw it in Iraq, we saw it in Afghanistan, we saw it in Libya. There were headlines in the Western media which had been captured by these presidents and their military. You know, you look at the military experts around Trump, and there aren't any. There's nobody of General David Petraeus's gravitas, or Storming Norman, as he was called during the first Gulf War. You know, these military advisors that Trump has around him are extremely lightweight. America is, if it thinks it's winning a war by killing 168 schoolgirls, then I'm quite shocked. He needs to let the scales drop from his eyes and see the reality. As I say, Iran has been preparing for this war for 50 years. And yesterday, for instance, over 80 missiles were stopped by the Qatar defense system. Only 2 missiles got through, but those 2 missiles destroyed a system worth $100 billion. Now then, I don't think that was a lucky strike at all. I think that was quite strategic. And the Iranians are playing quite a different style of military game to the Americans. The Americans just tend to throw it all out there, blast everything in sight, kill schoolgirls, kill people in hospitals, which is what has been happening, and civilians as well. But the Iranians are not going after people. They are going after equipment, and they're doing it very successfully. They're sacrificing a lot. But the missiles that are getting through are bang on target. So the missiles that are getting through are having 100% strike rate. Now, is that part of their strategy? Are these missiles that are getting through, did they already know that they were capable of gaming the system and beating these defensive shields? I don't know. I'm really not certain, but there's some strong evidence as well that they're getting backdoor help from China. So, you know, this is, if you listen to Trump, you think, yeah, the Americans are winning. But if you listen to Trump's words carefully, there is no substance to them at all. The first trap that the Iranians set up was when the Ayatollah Khomeini said, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying at home. That was the first trap. And he set himself up to become a martyr, which, as any Muslim knows, is a win-win situation. And the Americans fell for it. And by killing an 86-year-old man and his granddaughter, what they did was ignite the feelings of the entire Shia crescent around that part of the region. This has turned into a global war, and there will be consequences. And those consequences will last for years and years to come.
And Dr. Hamoud Salhi, I would like to bring him to comment on this as well. So technically, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, as you've been listening to both our distinguished guests, and if you ask any critique or analyst or observer, they would say that the conflict between the US and the Zionist entity and Iran is escalating and very fluid, with both parties or both sides actually claiming successes and suffering losses at the same time. So the US and the Zionist entity have launched strikes on Iran's, let's say, missile sites, naval forces, and other targets, while the Iranian side has retaliated with ballistic missiles and drones targeting US and Zionist assets in the region. Of course, we have had, I can go on and on about what happened, the Iran Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei being killed and so on and so forth. Now, what is your comment? Is there a winner out of this conflict?
I think that's the mentality of maybe American and Western mentality, that you think of winners and losers, that all conflicts, even human conflict, are reduced to a game of chess or sports or football or soccer in our part of the world. Certainly it is not. What is missing in this whole discussion, and as, for example, this week, Congress will meet to review, assess, hear the administration side of what they did, what they do. What you hear is about the process. Did you do this the right way? Why didn't you consult us? Well, the reality is much better than that. The reality is that there are root causes for why this happened. And for the American president or for the British or another one to isolate this attack on the Iranian away from the historical, the history of this region or Iran-American relations, that is a wrong way. Just a point. There is, despite what we think of Trump as being sort of different, and this is a Trumpian move, I think one could make a different argument, because American foreign policy is really based on continuity more than change. Let's pick up Clinton dual containment policy or doctrine that he initiated when he was in power in the 90s. Dual containment was based specifically to contain the Iranians and the Iraqis. Out of that dual containment, or in line of that containment, was the approval or the launching of Congress, the bills, the Iraqi bills, and the Iranian bills. And the Iranian bills are designed specifically to overthrow, to change the regime in Iran. This is late 90s, or probably, if my history reading doesn't fail me, earlier than that. But there was a plan by Congress to liberate Iraq, which they did, and we can argue about that. In many ways, we know the problems there, and also Iran. Well, late 90s, around 97, 98, Clinton launched another doctrine, and this is the preemptive doctrine, which was specifically designed to engage American troops, the airplanes, and destroy any facility that has the potential to be used for military purposes. For example, If a hospital has links to military, whatever it is bombarded. What did that quiet war, as was referred in late 90s, it set the stage for the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And that happened, for the invasion of Iraq in 2003, March. And because what Clinton did is that destroy the entire Iraqi infrastructure, and that helped create conditions for the big show and awe that we all familiar in the case of Iraq. What we've seen today is somewhat the same project. We are at the stage where we are preparing what you call this preemptive doctrine. The goal is not, or may not be, to regime change at this point, but as Netanyahu pointed out just recently, changing the regime will take time. What Netanyahu's goal is to pave the way. This kind of attacks, we pave the way for the destruction of Iran, and create chaos internally to make sure that instability will be the norm in Iran and other parts of the Middle East. I think that's where we are. Those are the real motives that we need to consider. I believe now, in terms of superiority, the United States is a superpower. Nobody is denying that. The United States could do anything it wants, and it has done everything it wants with the sort of ignoring international law, even the Security Council. I mean, we've seen a new interpretation of the resolution of the Security Council, and I'm fully aware of how you could manipulate these resolutions. I know that very well. But the United States has given a right to itself to be the victim and the assaulter in that perspective, and it views the laws from its own perspective. So its power, it's a strong military power, but we should not sort of ignore the fact that, as one of our poets in the region, Abul Qasim al-Shabi, who says, never forget the will of the people, and the will of the people is stronger than anything else. And I don't think that we are heading, if we continue on this path in the right way, we're heading for more lives being lost. And the loser in this case is the peoples in the regions, and the Iranians and others are the victims here, and the people more than any ways. Yeah.
Simple civilians indeed. And speaking of casualties, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, and the spillover in the Middle East, here is the latest. Lebanese authorities report 52 dead and 154 wounded after ongoing Zionist strikes hit the area. Beirut's southern suburbs were hit hardest, along with southern towns, Baalbek, the Bekaa Valley, Aitaroun and Tyre. The attacks have displaced 58,500 people, with fresh raids continuing Monday evening. The humanitarian toll keeps rising as the strikes intensify. Also, in the updates, thousands of people fled southern Lebanon as the Zionist strikes intensified. Authorities evacuate a hospital and 2 security stations in Nabatiyah. Civil defense reports mass displacement toward Beirut and Mount Lebanon, while Sidon shelters over 2,000 people in schools and public buildings. Also, in our updates, Lebanon bans Hezbollah military operations amid rising tensions. Prime Minister Nawaf Salam stresses that decisions on war and peace rest with the state. Security forces and the army are ordered to prevent attacks and ensure weapons remain under government control only. So I go back to you, Mr. James Bowden. When it comes to this, or in light of this development, would you think that the Middle East, or the entire Middle East, is really on the brink of a wider war?
I don't see any indication that there is a wider war. This comes up every single conflict that we have, and we keep hearing regional conflict, regional conflict. It is a conflict that spans the region, but it is not a regional conflict, and as much that we see a lot of the countries not participating, not joining. We have not seen the Persian Gulf engage with its Peninsular Shield Force. And we have not seen Iraq move any of its troops to any location, or Jordan or Syria. So right now it is simply a regional spanning war. And allow me to say that there are indications, and I'm not sure how strong they are, that Hezbollah did fire missiles across the border into Israel. Now, these might have been anti-tank missiles and with a very short range. And so it doesn't seem like these were just something that Israel conjured up. Maybe it did, but the information is that there was a reason for these strikes. And Hezbollah has been dragging Lebanon into these types of situations, and Lebanon is truly getting tired of it. But I really don't see right now any indications that anybody is preparing to strike back, and that has been Iran's hope.
What if let's say a spillover attack happens? Would you think that the Gulf states are prepared for such an event or scenario?
I don't know. I have actually talked to Jordanian military officials at U.S. CENTCOM, and they were very much of the opinion that the Gulf countries really don't represent a serious military power or threat to anybody. They really recognized Israel as the number one military threat in the entire region. So even if they did get involved, it is unclear how effective they would be. I mean, I did a study of their militaries. I've been a military scholar for the last 15 to 16 years, and I deal with this stuff on a daily basis. And I can tell you that the Gulf militaries are really organized and purchased around the bling factor. They buy a lot of very sophisticated weapon systems in the form of jets and tanks, but they have no interoperability, particularly and even within service. So one of their Air Force jets cannot communicate and interact with the other Air Force jet. Many of their tanks are completely invalid for the type of military environment. So even if they did want to get involved, I don't think that they would make any kind of significant contribution. So I think the U.S. has said, hey, we'll take care of this, and we've got it all under control, and we will continue to provide cover for you.
Thank you indeed. And Dr. Yvonne Ridley, still in the same context, would you think that maybe Lebanon is heading toward some kind of an internal confrontation? Is this something that we have gotten used to, let's say, every single time we see these strikes between Lebanon or Lebanon's Hezbollah and the Zionist entity happening at the borders? Or is this some kind of an opportunity that the Zionist entity is seizing toward its goal for the so-called Greater Israel?
Well, we saw Netanyahu just a few months ago go to the UN and pull out a map of the Greater Israel. And they want a slice of Syria, Lebanon, Saudi, Egypt, and
Jordan.
Iraq as well. So this is all part of the plan, and he held the map up. Now then, I think it's beginning to dawn on the Gulf countries that this is serious business. The Saudis are feeling abandoned. All of the key American personnel in the embassies, in the military bases have gone because they've obviously, it didn't take a genius to work out that there was going to be a war. The military buildup was in the Gulf region was astonishing. And so those who were taking holidays were advised, take them now. And so there's just a skeleton staff in the embassies and on the military bases. And one of the princes in Saudi Arabia has been briefing privately to the media, we feel abandoned. And that is not a good feeling for the American allies, especially when you consider the amount of money that Saudi stuffs in the pocket of the Americans in terms of military sales. So that there is a great unrest. Iran is this isn't just any sort of war, you know, like the Iran-Iraq war, which went on for 8 years. This is a war for the very survival and existence of the regime, which is determined to get out every single US military base across the Middle East. And I think that is their mission. I'm not sure what the Trump mission is. He keeps saying it's not regime change, then he says it is, and then he wants the people to rise up, and then he wants something else. You know, there is no clear mission for America, but there is for Iran, and they want every American base in the Middle East region out. And this could be the start of the beginning of the end for America's interference and meddling in the Middle East. And, you know, Donald Trump has taken a path which is not popular with European leaders, and our own Prime Minister today, who has a very weak backbone, actually stood and said, no, you can't use our bases anymore. Because as an international lawyer, he knows that what America is doing is illegal. And this is why Trump is going to be hit, I think, with an avalanche of impeachments over the coming months, that he won't be able to operate as a president.
Thank you indeed. And Dr. Hamoud Salhi, Dr. Yvonne just mentioned the objectives of the United States. Again, just a reminder, U.S. President Donald Trump has stated that the operation aims to, 1, destroy Iran's missile capabilities, 2, annihilate Iran's navy, prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, stop Iran's support for terrorism. And according to the U.S. Defense Secretary, he has actually emphasized that the operation is not a regime change war and aims to destroy Iran's military capabilities. Now, are these objectives really, let's say, realistic? And what realistic exit strategies exist here to get out of this spiking situation?
I think these are not objectives, or at least not the real objectives. The real objective is what is behind this whole assault on Iran, which is the Israeli agenda. For sure, the Israelis have long pushed to get the United States involved and be part of the conflict, so that they are not the only ones that are facing the Arab people or the regions, the people of the region. When America is part of this policies, Israel feels it's not alone. So we go back. I think the only thing that we have to be very sort of to give some credence, or maybe some thought, is the last goal, the fourth goal, which is the mission is not about regime change, but the destruction destruction of the Iranian military.
Okay, so despite let's say the non-declared objectives, Dr. Hamoud Salehi, what are the stated objectives? We all heard of it, but then how do these objectives align with international law? I mean, how could they be justified?
You know, from the start, these are all violation of international law. This is intervention in another sovereign state. This is not, if this was another country and not the United States, I guarantee you the United States will be the first one to argue that this country has violated international law. Each of these principles have sort of been, are a clear intervention in the national, against the sovereignty of a state. And this is the United Nations Charters, founded the United Nations Charters, found in the international law. So there is nothing you could say about it. In terms of the nuclear issue, the first goal, for example, what happened to when the operation of June 25, we were told that those were obliterated. Now we're saying that they were not, and they were trying to do them. But which organization is likely to look into that? Is the EIE. There is an atomic energy that should take care of that. And when you hear about some experts in atomic energy, there is a belief that there is no way they could be, if their program is obliterated, there is no way for them to be at this point reviving it. That is, there are institutions that help to that. So international law in many ways has been ignored. The other thing is that we seem to focus more on the action, on the military force, on giving away a narrative that the United States is suffering. I mean, you hear some of the narrative is that Iranians have killed tens of thousands of Americans. Well, you know, when did the U.S. and America and Iran went into a war? Well, if you bring me the idea of the proxies, well, you could also argue how many Iraqis were killed because of the American presence or occupation of Iraq. So these are really arguments that are by design political and serve the interest of whoever is saying them. We are today the war are won in social media and on the screen, and there is no better there is no better entity than the Western countries, the Western media, how they frame the conflict, how this conflict is being framed. I mean, from the start, this was framed as an attack against an evil, the argument is set there for justifying an unlawful anti-national an intervention in a state national interest, and that is the tragedy of this international order.
Mm-hmm. And let me bring Mr. James Bowden to the discussion again. One of the stated objectives, Mr. James Bowden, was the fact that the U.S. is trying to justify its action in Iran, let's say, to combat, supporting terrorism. Now, how does the U.S. justify its actions, considering its own history of supporting groups deemed terrorist by other countries, by other states? And here I can refer to, for example, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan and the Contras in Nicaragua. How do they justify their current stance against Iran?
So I think that any country would be able to legitimately say that the killing of its soldiers, while actually not even an act of terrorism, but an act of war. 242 United States Marines and service members were killed via Iranian training, funding, likely even putting together the device. That was an act of war. That wasn't even terrorism.
But who started
yes,
this?
I know that we can. Well, the Iranians did. I mean, heck, and that's a weird thing. We forget, back in the 1980s, the United States had protected and escorted out the PLO, the leadership and the fighters. We had assisted their evacuation from Lebanon, from Beirut. And yet we have the Iranians somehow creating and having this idea that they have a beef with us and, killing our soldiers. They took the embassy, a violation of international law and a violation of every international treaty. And the Iranians did nothing. In fact, they just kept them as hostages. And we had to finally get them out after 444 days. The Iranians actually committed an act of terror. They blew up. The first car bombing in the United States was in San Diego and was against I believe, the wife of the captain of the USS Vincennes. So, yes, I mean, we have had a long history of interaction with the Iranians, and the Iranians have been fighting against us. And many Americans have been frustrated about the lack of U.S. response. Now, the problem is that a lot of the people who are currently involved in making a lot of noise on social media against this are millennials and Gen Z who have no connection and no depth in history as to how serious the Iranian threat has been to the United States. Let's also remember that the Iranians bombed sites in Kuwait. There were, I believe, 2 bombings in that country. So the Iranians have had a long history, and I don't think that any country would tolerate the death of its soldiers on foreign territory. If Algeria sent soldiers to conduct a peace operation and they were bombed, let's say, by some people from France or Germany, I don't think Algeria would be like, oh, hey, that's okay, it's not a problem. No, you would say that's an act of war. And so, the United States, again, I just really want to emphasize, we have actually a lot of people who have complained about a lack of action and a lack of response and a feeling that Iran has steamrolled the United States. And I think that they truly have gotten a view that they can do whatever they want to the United States and will just simply, overlook it. And that had to stop, and that had to come to an end.
And Dr. Yvonne Ridley, this has to stop and this has to come to an end. But then what are the mechanisms to bring this mess into an end, let's say? And is there some kind of mediation party that could step in and just say, hey, let's just step back and, breathe and try to find a solution, get back to the negotiating table, something of this sort?
I think it's highly unlikely. I mean, the Americans have proven that they can't be trusted in negotiations. In fact, historically, they have torn up treaties going back hundreds of years. This is the norm for American conduct, and it is it's sad. It will take a great power to intervene and try and instill some sort of stability. And I think that may come from China. At the moment, China it has condemned the assassination of the Ayatollah Khomeini, but so far they've kept out of this war. It's into its 3rd day. I predict it will go on for some months yet. The Iranians are a people who've been under sanctions for nearly 50 years. They're used to hardship. There is going to be no bringing down of a regime. And to try and bring about a coup that would allow the Pahlavis to return again is just not realistic. You know, this is a family from the Peacock Throne days that is mired in drugs and scandal and isn't really in a position to have the full backing and support of the Iranian people. But again, with James, I'm not sure about what history books he's been reading, but American interference in Iran started in 1953 when they orchestrated a coup that overturned Mohammad Mossadegh. And that was because he had nationalized the country's oil sector. And as I say, there's nothing that triggers Americans like oil. And they'll find that out when they go to fill up their cars in the morning. And I think that all eyes will be on the streets of America and not necessarily the streets of Tehran, because the American people are not happy, and they're beginning to question the motives behind this war, which has been called the Epstein mission, in reference to Jeffrey Epstein's files, which are sitting like a ticking time bomb in the archives, and we've yet to see what they contain.
So, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, I, just like so many observers, believe that this will never come to an end as long as they believe that Iran poses a serious existential threat to the Zionist entity and the entire region. Now, is this rhetoric exaggerated? How true is this?
No, there is a lot of truth in that. Is that Israel need an enemy to justify its, its strategy. I mean, Israel's goal is to achieve what Netanyahu told us, the Greater Israel. So the idea of having Iran as an enemy is there for a reason, is to justify the existence of Israel in more ways than one. That's why Netanyahu doesn't talk. For him, and he said it on numerous occasions, that he's not interested in a regime change, a regime in Iran that would be a friendlier. But no, he's interested in a regime is in creating conditions for instability, chaos, so that Iran is fragmented. And Iran has all the potential to be a fragmented state because of the composition of the state. The majority of the Iranians are Azeris, plus you have other minorities there. So there are some dynamics there, demographics that could lead to that. And the Iranian state, Islamic Republic until now, has been successful in maintaining a national a nationhood, whether using force or not force, we're not saying about that, but it has maintained itself and it has sort of created conditions for itself to be successful, despite the sanctions, despite all of that. What I guess I'm saying is that Israel needs an enemy in the region. Otherwise, what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about the rights of Palestinians. And Karim, the biggest example of this whole thing is that where is Gaza? In this issue, I mean, James talks say Hezbollah attacked, but since November 24. 2024, when the ceasefire was signed with Lebanon, reports, these are UN reports, more than 1,000 violations, air and on the ground, were done by Israel. You have over 300 people killed on the Lebanese side. So now whether it's justified or not justified, the point is that when you have a system in place, an agreement in place, a ceasefire in place, Israel has found a way always to go around it and violate it. The same thing with Israel, with Gaza. So this idea of creating continuous conflict and continuous chaos serves Israel very well. If I could go back to George W. Bush strategy of the time, the spill of democracy. Remember, it was Iraq as part of the new era that would usher democracy. It was Iran, then Syria, then it was, we didn't know whether it was Syria or Iran. Those are the three countries that were said to be democratic after the collapse of the Iraqi regime of the time. Iraqi regime did collapse, and we are where we are today. And then, Syria, you could see today where Syria is, where most of a large number or a significant number of its territories are under Israeli occupation. Syria is going through some major problems, however you want to define it. And then today is Iran. So it fits in that really category where you need an enemy to survive. And that's why maintaining weakened Iran serves Israel very well. A total collapse, bringing a new regime in Iran that would preach democracy, would not serve Israel's agenda.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Mr. James Bowden? Maybe let's just assume and agree with Dr. Hamoud Salhi that having instability in the region may be the first benefiter, the one that would have interest is the Zionist entity. But would the U.S. benefit at all from instability in the region?
No, and actually it was interesting. I had a conversation last Monday and I was asked a question about this, and I said that there are an unfortunate number of people in the Middle East who have their positions of power because they are able to keep an environment of chaos and violence. And I was specifically talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, but also about Yasser Arafat going back a few years and going back to various leaders. And Israel has been definitely in violation of ceasefire agreements. And on my blog, I constantly talk about this to the point where I have been almost accused or outright accused of being anti-Semitic. So I definitely agree that there is a certain class of people, Benjamin Netanyahu foremost among them, who has to keep his position and can only do so through perpetuating a cycle of violence. Look, I was really upset and unhappy when I heard that he was coming to the United States and wanting to talk to Donald Trump about the ballistic missile program, because I know that he dazzles and, gets Donald Trump all under a spell whenever he comes to the White House, and then he hooks him in his nose and he leads him by that nose into doing foolish things. And so we probably will not see the end of these violent acts until Netanyahu is dead. Mm-hmm. And that's the unfortunate reality. And I don't like it. I think that Netanyahu has well exceeded what he should be doing and how he should be doing it. And I think that somebody ought to take away the wheels and the keys from him, because Netanyahu has a tendency towards miscalculation and overcalculation. And Israel actually saw that it was about a week ago. There was an attack against a border post, and the Lebanese finally started shooting back at them, saying, hey, this is the Lebanese army and you're not supposed to be firing. And I virtually and very well applauded the Lebanese for finally sticking up for themselves and defending themselves. So, yeah, violence definitely keeps these people in positions of power. But I think that until a few of these guys stop receiving excellent health care, we're going to have to live with them for a while.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Yvonne Ridley, in light of what has been discussed, so we have seen chaos perhaps as a diversion, Dr. Yvonne Ridley, a diversion from the Epstein file, as you mentioned earlier, perhaps a diversion from whatever the Prime Minister of the occupation is being pursued for, just, keep chaos and just keep people busy and concerned about other stuff. And even the very fact that the occupation's prime minister is being viewed as some kind of a religious leader, as a savior for some who believe in the so-called Greater Israel. Now, all this comes at a cost. This chaos is bringing a lot of costs because it's a war and with potentials for a spillover for the entire region. Now, how would the international community respond to this escalation and all this tension in the region? Are we going to see marches around different capitals like we've seen with the genocide in Gaza?
Well, the genocide in Gaza kept Netanyahu out of prison. Don't forget, he is still today facing charges for fraud, breach of trust, and bribery in a case that has been rattling around in Israel for many years. And I think even the ordinary Israelis realize that it was in Netanyahu's interests to keep the war in Gaza going so that he could avoid facing his day in court on these very serious charges of fraud, breach of trust, and bribery. So this is a man who is a born survivor, and he will use every trick in the book. He will bomb schools, bomb hospitals. He will kill anyone as long as he can avoid his day in court. And of course, to compound that, he's also wanted as a war criminal. This is not a very nice man. This is not a man you would want to introduce to your mother on a Sunday afternoon. He is an unsavory character, but then again, so is the President of the United States, who is facing, according to the Epstein files, some very serious charges of involving rape and children. Now then, this is why this operation has been called the Epstein mission. And some people might say, oh, it's too far-fetched, an American president wouldn't go out on a bombing campaign to save his reputation. Well, Bill Clinton did. Bill Clinton bombed the Al-Shifa factory in Sudan during the height of the Monica Lewinsky scandal. And frankly, I'm just surprised that the American people put up with this bad behavior from their politicians. Although for some reason, this corrupt behavior seems to be almost like a pandemic across the world at the moment. Britain has been rocked in politics with scandals. Israel, it's become commonplace. And now we have a president of the United States mired in so much controversy that it makes you wonder how he can survive as well. And of course, they do survive because of the chaos that they spread around them. And they're starting so many fires that people are looking left, right, and center. And they are being distracted from the real cause. I think that Donald Trump will not see his presidency to an end, whether he keels over or is taken out, or whatever happens to him, I just can't see him finishing his term in office. He's insane, and he's killing innocent people. And there are 168 little schoolgirls who would be alive today if it were not for the evil insanity that is miring the American president and involving and cajoled by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Dr. Hamoud Salhi, maybe we might wonder about the consequences. We have spoken about it earlier, but then how quickly can the Gulf states be involved in a direct or an indirect manner? The USA, the occupation entity, as well as global markets. I mean, how quickly can all these parties expect supply and price shocks to translate into domestic political pressure?
Well, that's really the most important question. There are consequences to actions like this. There are implications. And we mentioned earlier the oil prices with the closure of Strait of Hormuz. That is already seeing an impact. The oil prices went up just today. As Ivan mentioned earlier as well, you have this will be felt in the US and across other parts of the world. The long term, and this is where the danger is, you can't continue to use force to go and attack others and without thinking that there are some repercussions. These are lives people are at stake. So regardless of who is the invader, people will react. You cannot oppress people forever. They are going to be react. So the internal pressure across the Middle East will be very significant. I mean, we just sort of, we went through a huge, and we continue to see what's happening in Gaza. That has a big impact on internationally. You have seen now in the United States a new trend where your position on Gaza or your solidarity with or your support of Israel appears to start to have sort of some kind of consequences. In the Middle East, this is really a time to start rethinking about the region itself. Does it make sense to have an Arab League that is inefficient? Does it make sense to have a Gulf Cooperation Council? James mentioned the SHIELD, Arabian Peninsula, joint forces that the Gulf countries have. Does having an organization like regional organizations that have no impact when it comes to a matter of peace or a matter that affect the entire region? So this is the time for the region to come back and perhaps look at, take a great look at its internal challenges. The sad thing is that there is a huge disparity between the elites and the majority of the population. The income disparities is one of them. And then you have the changes in the global order. I mean, we're shifting to an era of artificial intelligence, and that also will create difficulties in this region. So we are really in a place where perhaps the entire region sits down and start to rethink what to do next. One of the things, we once a while we hear about the Arab League coming together and issuing a communique and so on and so forth. The same thing with the GCC. GCC has so many communiques that are designed to bring the region together, and they have done a wonderful job. But there is still more work to do, which is really think about the real issues that these people are facing. And, it's not by coincidence that we find ourselves in these conditions. It is about our elites. It's about how we sign treaties. It is about signing deals without respect to the people. It's looking after a self-serving agenda than the entire people or population. The Gulf countries that done very well in terms of economic welfare, economic benefits, one of the wealthiest region in the whole world. It's the only region that is very stable. What's going to happen next when we see this kind of events happening? A good example, we've seen, for example, Kuwait prior to the invasion of Iraq, where Kuwait City was seen as one of the places where people go in and enjoying themselves. It was sort of not close to Beirut of the 70s or Dubai today, but it has a lot of interest. It was one of the cities that was well there for people to see and enjoy. Well, after the Iraq invasion, Kuwait disappeared from the whole scene. This is despite the fact that millions of dollars were poured in, but it was other cities, Dubai, Abu
Dhabi. Well, we seem that we have lost the connection with you, Dr. Hamoud Salhi. We will try to fix that. Let's turn now to Yvonne Ridley, since Dr. Hamoud Salhi have been shedding a lot of light on the Gulf countries. Now, what about the non-Gulf regional economies, which, according to you, you think are most vulnerable to these events and to extended shipping disruption and perhaps food prices spiking up?
Well, all the European countries will feel the pain of the increase in fuel prices because I think more than 20% of the ships that the oil tankers actually have to pass through the Straits of Hormuz. So this is going to wreak havoc on the economies of the G7 countries that can ill afford to have any more disruption to their economies. And so it will definitely impact on the European economies. And I think that this is one of the reasons that Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, has suddenly found his spine and stood up and said, you can't use our bases. I think that there are other European countries that are following suit. He would never have made such a decision without consulting other countries in Europe. So I suspect that the European Union will come out eventually and say, you can't use our countries from which to launch attacks on Iran. I believe Spain has come out and told that to Trump already. So, even friends are going to find, and trading partners are going to find that their relationship with America is under severe pressure as well. As I say, this hasn't been highly thought out, but I did read an interesting article the other day that during the build-up of American forces in the Gulf regions, widely reported and certainly not hidden from sight. It was obvious that some sort of huge military exercise or attack was underway. And Trump had convinced himself that once the Iranian intelligence had picked up all of this chatter and had the photographic evidence and had seen these huge armadas and aircraft carriers and everything heading towards Iran, Trump actually thought that this would be enough for the Iranians to back down and comply with whatever deal he wanted. And this shows the naivety of those around advising the president. As I say, there's nobody there with great military gravitas, and you have to wonder at the quality of people around him. And he has this board of peace, this board of billionaires, and that he has assembled. And they're not experts in the Middle East. You know, they know how to make money. And that is the sort of people that Trump is surrounding himself with. So I think that he'll sit up tomorrow and he'll be furious when he finds out that European countries, one by one, are falling like dominoes, saying, no, we are not going to let you use our bases and our land. And before long, it's quite possible that countries will see American bases on their land as something that it's not worth having, it's not worth the bother. And inadvertently, what Trump may have triggered here is the withdrawal of America from the Middle East and an end to the meddling. Because as soon as it starts hitting people and hurting people in the pocket, as it will in Europe and as it will with ordinary Americans, you will see the people start to rise up and start to demand questions. And I think that Trump has frittered away all of his goodwill because he's put Israel first and America second.
Excellent point, Dr. Yvonne Ridley, which brings me to the next question to Mr. James Bowden. Do you accept that prolonged commercial disruption could actually produce political pushback in partner capitals that constrains the campaign on Iran? And if so, how should planners factor that in?
Well, I definitely think that the longer it goes on, especially the United Arab Emirates and Qatar will be the most severely impacted in the region. Both the United Arab Emirates and Qatar have been rebuilding and diversifying their economies in order to promote themselves beyond oil and natural gas. And they have been trying to become regional hubs and destinations, even for medical tourism. And so these are the capitals that will face the most immediate pressure and pinch from these operations. And I think that they definitely have a great interest in seeing this resolved. They lose millions, if not billions of dollars because of flight disruptions. You know, I have been in the United Arab Emirates and I have been in Qatar. And I can tell you that these airports benefit greatly from their serving as regional and transportation hubs. So, yes, I mean, they want to get those planes flying. They want to have them coming back in and they want to have them going back out. And I think that there will be eventually a lot of pressure to wrap this thing up. Listening to Trump and his discussion about having a weeks on end type of operation, I would hope that it certainly does not extend into Iranian missiles still flying across the Gulf. They will put an end to that and they will say, look, we've got to stop this because they need to resume their economic life. And yes, it will eventually trickle down and it will go through the system and send an economic contagion throughout. And Trump has been trying to make a case unsuccessfully to the American people that the American economy is affordable and that affordability is a boogeyman invented by the Democrats. It's not. When you can go to the grocery store and spend $100 in buying 2 bags of groceries, you begin to think affordability is not real. And the gas adds up, the insurance adds up, the food adds up, and let's not forget the tariffs. And this conflict will eventually become another type of tariff because it will be an interruption on trade. And so, Trump will begin to feel more pressure. But unfortunately, and this is why I would correct the view that this is a Jeffrey Epstein type of operation. It's not, because Donald Trump believes that he is already spectacularly popular and the most popular president, and he doesn't need to deflect attention. For him, Jeffrey Epstein is a non-issue, and he doesn't believe that any of his voters actually take this seriously when they do. So you have to look at the world from Trump's perspective, and when you do, you begin to realize that it's a very totally different type of world. So I think it would take a lot of pressure from Saudi Arabia, from the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, and very loud shouts to say, hey, knock this off.
Thank you indeed, Mr. James Bowden. And as we near the end of our coverage, I would like to give the opportunity to Dr. Hamoud Salhi to finish off his idea before we had that, connection problem. And I would like to add this question, Dr. Hamoud Salhi. How unified, according to you, are U.S. allies, Europe, Gulf partners on the objectives, and where do fractures already appear?
To finish the thought about the Arab world, I think the idea I was trying to project is the need to look at the Arab system, its organizations, and regional organizations like the GCC and others, and ensure, and this is a good time for it because we are in a transition to a new type of economy, if you want, the artificial intelligence, the digital world. All those require us to be more prudent and work together collaboratively. And on the other hand, for the mere fact that this state of violence has to stop because it affects the people and the leaders. Everyone is affected in the region. So there are reasons to believe that maybe this is a wake-up call. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but with the consequences that that we expect to happen and the way these attacks are moving, it's alarming for people who live in the region. So that's really the main thing. For the United States, I think we're going through another phase of unilateralism, where the United States is thinking more about its national interest, about America's first, and America being the greatest, and that has sort of affected its sort of the solidarity among the Europeans. This is reflected precisely when the idea of taking control of Greenland, where the Europeans start to had some misgiving about that, and they objected to that, and I think when James talked about looking at the world from a Trumpian perspective, that's what you see. You see the idea that, in fact, this is about the United States and the rest.
Dr. Hamoud Salhi, we have run out of time, and we will have enough time maybe next coverage. Thank you indeed for all those insights. Dr. Hamoud Salhi, Associate Dean Professor of International Studies at University of California from Los Angeles. You are live with us. Thank you indeed. Dr. Yvonne Ridley, journalist and Middle East analyst, diplomatic diplomatic editor, columnist and author from Scotland. Thank you indeed for the insights as well. And Mr. James Bowden, Senior Advisor, European Defence and Geopolitical Analyst from Virginia. Thank you all indeed for all the insights. And thank you, dear viewers, for keeping it here on our channel. And we will keep covering all the developments as they happen. Thank you and good night.